The water shimmered under the summer sun, reflecting a perfect suburban afternoon, until Marcus watched three small bodies slip through his fence again. He'd asked nicely. He'd warned their mother. Now, standing at the pool's edge with the drain valve in his hand, he made a choice that would shatter two families, expose buried secrets, and prove that sometimes the only way to protect what's yours is to destroy it completely. What he didn't know was that Corinne's 911 call would uncover something far darker than trespassing. Marcus Chen stood at his kitchen window, coffee growing cold in his hand, watching the ripples spread across his pool's surface. The water caught the early morning light, throwing diamonds of reflection against the fence that separated his property from the Hendersons' yard next door. He'd saved for 3 years to install that pool. Every overtime shift, every skipped vacation, every penny carefully allocated in the budget spreadsheet his late wife had started before the cancer took her. The pool was supposed to be their dream. Now it was his alone. He pressed his palm against the cool glass, remembering Sarah's excitement when the contractors had finally finished the project last spring. She'd managed exactly 2 swims before the treatments made her too weak. He'd held her in the shallow end on her last good day, the water supporting her fragile weight, her smile brilliant despite everything. The doorbell shattered his reverie. Marcus set down his mug and moved through the house, already knowing who he'd find on his porch. Corinne Henderson stood there in her usual uniform of athleisure wear and oversized sunglasses, her blonde hair pulled into a severe ponytail that somehow managed to look both casual and aggressively styled. "Marcus," she said, not quite making it sound like a greeting, "we need to talk about yesterday." "Good morning to you too, Corinne." He didn't step aside to invite her in. "My children were very upset. Ethan said you yelled at him." Marcus felt the familiar tension building in his shoulders. "I didn't yell. I asked him and his siblings to leave my property, for the 4th time this month. They're children, they see a pool on a hot day." Corinne adjusted her sunglasses, though they were already perfectly positioned. "You could be more understanding." "Understanding?" Marcus kept his voice level through sheer force of will. "Your kids have been jumping my fence and using my pool without permission since June. I've asked nicely. I've spoken to you 3 separate times. Yesterday I found them in the deep end with no adult supervision. Do you understand how dangerous that is?" "Oh, please." Corinne waved her hand dismissively. "Ethan is 11. He's been swimming since he was 3. "That's not the point." "Then what is the point, Marcus? That you're a lonely widower who can't stand to see children having fun. That pool just sits there empty most of the time anyway." The words hit like a physical blow. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, his fingers curling against the doorframe. "Get off my property." "Excuse me." "You heard me. Leave now." Corinne's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. "You're being completely unreasonable." "I'm being unreasonable. Your children are trespassing. That's illegal. If you can't control them, I'll take further steps." "Are you threatening my kids?" "I'm telling you to be a parent." Marcus stepped back and swung the door closed, cutting off whatever response she'd been preparing. He stood in the entryway, breathing hard, hands shaking with suppressed anger. Through the decorative glass panels beside the door, he watched Corinne's distorted figure storm back across the lawn toward her own house. She moved with sharp, aggressive movements, already pulling out her phone. Marcus returned to the kitchen and dumped his cold coffee down the sink. The morning felt ruined, tainted by confrontation and Corinne's casual cruelty about Sarah. He looked out at the pool again, seeing it differently now. Not a memorial to his wife's dreams, but a liability, an invitation for trouble he didn't need. His phone buzzed with a text from his brother David, "Still coming to dinner Friday." Marcus typed back, "Yeah, looking forward to it." At least that was true. David's family provided the only real warmth in his life these days. His brother's wife Julia always made too much food, and their teenage daughter Emma had a way of making him laugh despite himself. The day stretched ahead with all the appeal of a dental appointment. Marcus worked from home now, a software consultant for a firm that had been understanding about his flexible schedule during Sarah's illness and had simply let the arrangement continue afterward. He settled into his home office, a converted bedroom with a view of the backyard, and tried to focus on debugging code for a client's inventory system. He managed perhaps 20 minutes of actual work before movement outside caught his eye. 3 children were scaling his fence. Marcus was out of his chair and through the back door before conscious thought caught up with action. His bare feet hit the hot concrete of the patio as Ethan Henderson dropped into his yard, followed by his sister Sophia, maybe 9 years old, and the youngest, Jacob, who couldn't be more than 6. "Stop right there." Marcus's voice came out harder than he'd intended. All 3 children froze. Jacob's eyes went wide, his small hands still gripping the fence rail. "We just wanted to swim," Ethan said, affecting a teenage bravado that didn't quite mask his nervousness. "It's like 90 degrees out." "I don't care if it's 120. This is not your pool." Marcus walked toward them, and Sophia instinctively moved to put her older brother between herself and the angry adult. "Where's your mother?" "She went to the store," Sophia offered in a small voice. "So she left you alone, and you immediately decided to break into my yard again." Marcus stopped a few feet away, trying to soften his stance for the younger children while maintaining authority. "Do you understand that you can't just take things that don't belong to you?" "You're not using it," Ethan argued. "What's the big deal?" "The big deal is that it's mine, and if something happened to you in that pool, I'd be responsible. What if one of you got hurt? What if Jacob here can't swim as well as he thinks he can?" "I'm a good swimmer," Jacob protested. "That's not the point. The point is," Marcus cut himself off, recognizing the futility of explaining liability and property rights to children who'd been taught none of it mattered. "Just go home, climb back over that fence and don't come back." "You're mean," Sophia said quietly. The words shouldn't have stung, but they did. Marcus watched the children scramble back over the fence, Ethan helping boost his younger siblings. When they disappeared back into their own yard, he stood there in the heat, feeling the sun bake into his shoulders, staring at the pool that had become the center of so much conflict. An idea formed, terrible and final. Marcus went back inside and pulled up his browser. A quick search gave him what he needed: a pool service company that handled draining and maintenance. He dialed before he could second-guess himself. "Clearwater Pool Services, this is Rita." "Hi, I need to have my pool drained. How soon can you do it?" "Drained completely. That's unusual this time of year. Is there a problem with the water chemistry?" "No, I just want it drained. Can you do it this week?" "We could send someone tomorrow, but I should mention that draining a pool and leaving it empty can cause structural issues. If the water table is high in your area, an empty pool can actually pop out of the ground. We usually recommend." "I understand the risks. How much?" Rita quoted a price that made Marcus wince, but he gave her his credit card information anyway. They scheduled for early the next morning. When he hung up, he felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and grief, as if he just scheduled the demolition of a monument. That afternoon, Marcus forced himself to go to the grocery store. Normal tasks felt like swimming through mud lately, but the refrigerator was approaching bare, and he couldn't survive on delivery food forever. He was examining produce with the enthusiasm of someone defusing a bomb when he heard the familiar voice behind him. "Well, if it isn't the pool Nazi." Marcus turned to find Corinne with a shopping cart full of organic branded items and a smirk that made her previous hostility look friendly. 2 other women flanked her, both wearing the same upscale casual aesthetic, both studying him with interested eyes. "Corinne," he kept his tone neutral. I was just telling Melissa and Janet about our neighbor who thinks he owns the neighborhood because he has a pool. Karen's voice carried, drawing glances from other shoppers. Imagine being so petty that you can't let children swim on a hot day. Imagine teaching your children that other people's property is theirs to use. Marcus picked up a head of lettuce he didn't want, just to have something to do with his hands. "They're children," Janet chimed in, a shorter woman with aggressively highlighted hair. "Have some compassion." "I have plenty of compassion. I have boundaries too." "Boundaries," Karen repeated with a laugh that held no humor. "Is that what we're calling selfishness now?" Marcus felt a flush creeping up his neck. Other shoppers were definitely watching now, the suburban theater of public confrontation too compelling to ignore. "I'm calling it property rights, but you do you, Karen." He walked away before she could respond, abandoning his cart in the produce section and leaving the store entirely. His hands shook as he drove home, anger and embarrassment warring in his chest. By the time he pulled into his driveway, he decided to order groceries online like a normal person in the 21st century. The rest of the day passed in a blur of work and distraction. Marcus ordered Thai food for dinner and ate it mechanically while watching a documentary about deep-sea creatures. The profound darkness of the ocean floor felt appropriate somehow, a physical manifestation of his current mood. He went to bed early and slept poorly, dreaming of Sarah swimming in their pool while Karen and her children stood on the deck, pointing and laughing. He woke at 5 in the morning, groggy and disoriented, and couldn't fall back asleep. Instead, he made coffee and watched the sunrise paint his backyard in shades of orange and gold. The Clearwater Pool Services van arrived at 7 sharp. Two men emerged, one older with a weathered face and sun-damaged skin, one younger who looked barely out of high school. The older one, whose shirt identified him as Dale, approached the back door where Marcus waited. "Mr. Chen, we're here about the pool draining." "Right, thanks for coming so early." "You sure about this? It's a nice pool. Seems a shame to drain it at the peak of summer." "I'm sure." Dale shrugged, clearly accustomed to customers making choices he didn't understand. "Your water bill. Where do you want us to run the drainage?" Marcus showed them to the street drain at the end of his driveway. The process would take several hours, Dale explained, and they'd need to monitor it to ensure proper flow and avoid flooding. Marcus signed the paperwork and retreated inside, trying to focus on work while the sound of pumps and running water provided a constant background soundtrack. Around 9, his doorbell rang again. Karen stood on his porch, but this time the pretense of civility was completely absent. Her face was flushed, her eyes bright with anger. "What the hell are you doing?" "Good morning, Karen. I'm having my pool drained." "Why?" "Because it's my pool and I can do what I want with it." "This is because of my kids, isn't it? You're doing this to be spiteful." Marcus leaned against the doorframe, surprised by how calm he felt. "I'm doing this because I'm tired of the constant conflict. No pool means no trespassing. Problem solved." "You're insane. You're literally destroying something just to what? Prove a point." "To have peace on my own property. That's all I've ever wanted." Karen's mouth worked soundlessly for a moment. "My children are devastated. They watched those men start draining the pool and they're crying. Crying. Does that make you happy?" "No, actually, it doesn't. But maybe it'll be a good lesson about respecting other people's boundaries." "You're a horrible person, Marcus. Your wife would be ashamed of you." The calm shattered. "Get the hell off my property right now." "Or what, you'll call the cops? For what, standing on your porch?" "I'll do whatever I need to do to make you leave me alone." Karen stepped closer, and Marcus could see the fine lines around her eyes, the tension in her jaw. "You think you can just do whatever you want because you're some grieving widower. That doesn't give you the right to punish my kids." "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm exercising my property rights. Now leave. Fine, but this isn't over. She spun on her heel and marched back across the lawn. Marcus closed the door and leaned against it, his heart racing. The confrontation had left him feeling simultaneously vindicated and queasy, like winning an argument but losing something more important in the process. He checked on the pool workers through the kitchen window. They were methodical and professional, ignoring the domestic drama unfolding around them. The water level had dropped visibly, exposing the tile line that Sarah had spent an afternoon choosing, debating between blues and earth tones. His phone rang. David's name appeared on the screen. "Hey," Marcus answered. "Hey yourself. Julia wanted me to confirm Friday. Should we do 6 or 7? Whatever works for you guys, 6 is fine." "You okay? You sound off." Marcus glanced at the pool, at the workers, at the growing divide between his life and normalcy. "Just dealing with some neighbor stuff. It's fine." "The pool thing." "Yeah." David was quiet for a moment. "You're draining it." "Right now, actually." "Marcus, please don't tell me I'm overreacting. I've dealt with this situation for months. I'm done." "I wasn't going to say that. I was going to say that I'm sorry you're in this position, and that I'll bring extra beer on Friday because it sounds like you need it." Marcus felt a tightness in his chest ease slightly. "Thanks, that'd be good." "Listen about Sarah." Not right now." "Okay, but we should talk soon." "Maybe. I'll see you Friday." After they hung up, Marcus made himself a sandwich he didn't want and tried to work on code that refused to make sense. The afternoon dragged with the weight of a season changing, something fundamental shifting beneath the surface of his small suburban life. By 4 o'clock, the pool was mostly empty. Dale knocked on the back door to let Marcus know they were finishing up. "All done, Mr. Chen. Water's drained, pumps are disconnected. I left you some information about pool maintenance while it's empty. You'll want to clean it every few weeks to prevent algae buildup, and seriously consider refilling it within a month or 2. An empty pool is not a happy pool." Marcus thanked him and watched the van drive away. Then he walked out to the backyard and looked at what he'd done. The pool was a concrete wound in his yard. The deep end gaped like a mouth, the shallow end steps leading to nothing. Leaves and small debris dotted the bottom, and the diving board stretched over empty air. It looked abandoned, post-apocalyptic, sad. It looked like how he felt inside. Marcus stood there until the shadows grew long and the evening air cooled his skin. He thought about Sarah, about her laugh when she'd first seen the completed pool, about the way she'd held his hand during the first swim. He thought about his neighbor's children, about their tears, about the fact that they were just kids who wanted to swim on hot days. He thought about drawing lines in the sand and the cost of defending them. A sound made him turn. Karen stood at the fence, her children clustered behind her. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Sophia started crying, quiet sobs that carried across the yards. "I hope you're proud," Karen said. Her voice was different now, not angry but cold, absolute. "I called the police." "You what?" "I called the police and reported you for draining pool water into the street. It's illegal dumping. And I told them about your threatening behavior toward my children." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "I never threatened your children." "That's not how they'll tell it. All 3 of them are very scared of the angry man next door who yells at them and destroyed the pool they loved." "They loved, it was never their pool." "Their children, Marcus. The police will take their statements very seriously. So will Child Protective Services when I report that there's a disturbed individual next door who's fixated on my kids." "You're lying, you're making things up." "Am I, or am I just a concerned mother protecting her children from an unstable neighbor?" Karen smiled, and it was the coldest expression Marcus had ever seen. "You wanted to play hardball, let's play." She ushered her children back toward the house, leaving Marcus standing beside his empty pool, his world tilting sideways. This couldn't be happening. He just wanted them to respect his boundaries. He just wanted peace. The first patrol car arrived 20 minutes later. Marcus watched through his front window as a police cruiser pulled up to the curb. His palms were sweating, his mind racing through everything that had happened, trying to figure out what to say, how to explain. The officer who approached his door was young, maybe late 20s, with sharp eyes and a neutral expression. Marcus Chen. Yes. I'm Officer Rodriguez. We received a complaint from your neighbor about illegal water drainage and possible threatening behavior toward minors. Can we talk about that? Of course. Look, this is all a misunderstanding. Why don't you start from the beginning? Tell me what's been going on. Marcus invited the officer inside and laid out the entire situation. The months of trespassing, the conversations with Karen, the decision to drain the pool. Rodriguez took notes, his expression giving nothing away. And you never threatened the children. Never. I asked them to leave my property, that's all. The mother says you were aggressive and frightening. The kids backed up that story. Because she told them to. Officer, I'm the victim here. They've been trespassing for months. I have a right to drain my own pool. You do, Rodriguez agreed. Though the water discharge into the street drain is technically a violation, you're supposed to get a permit for that. We'll need to document it. A permit? The pool service company didn't mention a permit. Not all of them do. It's a minor violation, usually just a fine, but combined with the other allegations. Rodriguez looked around the house, at the photos of Sarah still on the walls, at the general atmosphere of stagnant grief. Mr. Chen, are you doing okay? What kind of question is that? A concerned one. You've recently lost your wife. You're in conflict with your neighbors. You made a pretty extreme decision about the pool. I'm just checking in. Marcus felt his defenses crumble slightly. I'm coping, as well as anyone would be. Have you thought about talking to someone, a therapist? I don't need a therapist. I need my neighbors to respect my property. Rodriguez studied him for a long moment. I'm going to be straight with you. This situation doesn't look great from the outside. A widower fixated on kids swimming in his pool. It's not a good narrative. It's not about being fixated. It's about boundaries and liability and... I understand, but perception matters. My advice, let this go. Stay away from the Henderson family. Don't engage with them at all. And consider talking to someone about how you're processing your grief. After Rodriguez left, Marcus sat in his darkening living room and tried to make sense of what had just happened. His attempt to end the conflict had escalated it beyond anything he'd imagined. Karen had weaponized the police, turned his reasonable frustration into something that sounded disturbed and threatening when filtered through her narrative. His phone buzzed, a text from a number he didn't recognize. You'll regret this. Marcus stared at the message, his hands trembling. Was this Karen, one of her friends? Someone else who'd heard the distorted version of events? He blocked the number and set his phone face down on the coffee table. Sleep was impossible that night. Marcus lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around him. Every creak sounded like footsteps. Every distant siren made his heart race, expecting another patrol car to arrive with worse accusations. At 3 in the morning, he got up and went to the window overlooking the backyard. The empty pool was a dark void in the moonlight, a monument to his Pyrrhic victory. He'd won the battle for his property rights and lost something more important in the process: peace, safety, the simple ability to exist in his home without fear. The next morning brought a new horror. Marcus discovered it when he went out to get the newspaper, a habit left over from Sarah's time, though he rarely read it anymore. Someone had spray-painted his mailbox with crude red letters, "Child Hater." His stomach turned. He looked up and down the street, but it was early enough that no one was out yet. The paint was still slightly wet, meaning it had happened within the last few hours. While he'd been awake and terrified, someone had been outside his house vandalizing his property. Marcus took photos with shaking hands and filed an online police report. Then he scrubbed at the paint with turpentine until his hands ached and the letters were reduced to red smears. The mailbox would need to be replaced, but at least the message was illegible now. He was standing in his driveway, sweaty and exhausted, when Mrs. Palmer from 3 houses down walked by with her small white dog. "Good morning, Marcus," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "Morning, Mrs. Palmer. I heard about the pool, such a shame." Yeah, he waited for the judgment, for the lecture about children and community. Instead, she said quietly, "Corinne Henderson is a piece of work. Don't let her get to you." Marcus looked at her in surprise. "You know about?" "Honey, everyone on this street knows. She's been bad-mouthing you to anyone who will listen. Most of us know better than to take her at face value." Mrs. Palmer's dog sniffed at Marcus's foot. "That woman has been a problem since she moved in. Tried to get the HOA to force the Johnsons to cut down their oak tree because it blocked her view. Filed noise complaints about the Ramirez family's kids playing in their own yard. You're just her latest target." "I didn't know that." "Why would you? You're grieving, you keep to yourself. But Marcus, be careful. When Corinne sets her sights on someone, she doesn't quit. She's mean and she's persistent and she has a lot of time on her hands." After Mrs. Palmer continued her walk, Marcus felt fractionally better. At least someone understood. But the vandalism and the anonymous text hung over him like storm clouds. This wasn't just about the pool anymore. It had metastasized into something uglier. Work was impossible. Marcus sat at his computer and achieved nothing, his mind circling through scenarios and fears. By noon, he'd given up and decided to do something productive with his anxiety. He drove to a hardware store and bought security cameras. Installing them took most of the afternoon. Marcus mounted cameras covering his front door, driveway, backyard, and the fence line he shared with the Hendersons. If anyone approached his property again, he'd have evidence. The act of securing his home felt both necessary and deeply depressing, like admitting defeat. Friday evening arrived with the weight of destiny. Marcus almost canceled dinner with David's family, but the thought of sitting alone in his house felt unbearable. He showered, changed into clean clothes that actually matched, and drove across town to his brother's suburban home. David answered the door with a beer already in hand. "You look terrible." "Thanks, you always know how to make a guy feel welcome." "I'm serious, come inside." Julia had made lasagna, and the smell of garlic and oregano hit Marcus like a wave of nostalgia. Normal. This was what normal felt like. Emma bounced into the kitchen, her dark hair in a messy bun, and gave Marcus an enthusiastic hug. "Uncle Marcus, Dad said you drained your pool, that's so weird." "Emma," Julia warned. "What it is?" "It's fine," Marcus said. "Yeah, I drained it, long story." Over dinner, he told them the condensed version. David and Julia exchanged concerned looks throughout, and Emma listened with the intensity of a teenager drawn to drama. When he finished, Julia reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "Marcus, that woman sounds awful." "She is, but she's also right that I probably overreacted." "No," David said firmly. "You set a boundary. She refused to respect it. The pool was your property to do with as you wanted." "But the way she's spinning it is manipulative garbage. Don't internalize her narrative." Emma pushed her lasagna around her plate. "Can I ask something?" "Sure." "Do you think maybe she's right that you're, like, processing stuff badly? About Aunt Sarah?" The table went quiet. Marcus felt 3 sets of eyes on him, waiting. "Maybe," he admitted. "I don't know, everything feels wrong since she died. Some days I can barely function. Other days I'm angry at nothing and everything. The pool thing just became this focal point for all of it." Have you thought about therapy? Julia asked gently. Everyone keeps asking me that. Because everyone's worried about you, David said. Marcus, we love you, we want to help, but you have to let us. Marcus felt something crack inside him, a wall he'd been maintaining through sheer force of will. I don't know how to do this, any of it. Being alone, dealing with neighbors, existing in a house that's full of her absence. I thought draining the pool would solve one problem, but it just created 10 more. Then we'll help you solve those, Julia said. That's what family does. They spent the rest of the evening talking through options. David suggested consulting a lawyer about the harassment. Julia offered to help Marcus clean out some of Sarah's things if he was ready. Emma, with the blunt wisdom of 16, told him he needed to stop acting like a hermit and rejoin the human race. By the time Marcus drove home, he felt marginally better. The house was still empty and silent, but the security cameras blinked their little red lights, and he felt fractionally safer. He fell asleep on the couch watching late-night television, his dreams mercifully free of pools and angry neighbors. The weekend passed quietly. No more vandalism, no more confrontations. Marcus worked in his yard, deliberately ignoring the empty pool, and caught up on client work. He even managed to call a therapist and schedule an appointment for the following week. Small steps toward functionality. Monday morning brought fresh catastrophe. Marcus woke to find his internet dead. Annoying, but not unprecedented. He called the service provider and got the usual runaround about sending a technician. But when he went outside to check the connection box, he found the cables had been deliberately cut. Someone had destroyed his internet connection. Marcus stood there staring at the severed wires, feeling a cold rage settle over him. This was beyond vandalism. This was targeted harassment designed to disrupt his ability to work. He called the police and filed another report, then called his internet provider to explain that this wasn't a technical issue but criminal damage. While he waited for both the police and the technician, Marcus reviewed his security footage. The cameras had captured everything. At 2:17 in the morning, a figure in dark clothes and a baseball cap had approached his house. The person had moved quickly to the internet box, used wire cutters to sever the cables, and then jogged back down the street. The footage wasn't clear enough to identify them, but the build suggested male, probably adult. Officer Rodriguez arrived an hour later, looking tired and unsurprised. Mr. Chen, more neighbor troubles. Someone sabotaged my internet. I have it on camera. Rodriguez reviewed the footage on Marcus's phone, his expression hardening. I'll need a copy of this. That's criminal mischief, possibly more depending on the damage caused. You have any idea who it might be? It's related to the Hendersons. It has to be. Can you prove that? Who else would do this? Mr. Chen, I understand you're frustrated, but unless you have evidence linking this to a specific person, we can't make accusations. So what? I'm just supposed to live with random acts of vandalism? No, we'll investigate. I'll personally talk to the Hendersons, but you need to understand something. Rodriguez handed back Marcus's phone. This is escalating. Both sides are dug in. Someone needs to be the bigger person and walk away. I've tried walking away. I drained the pool, remember. I'm staying away from them. And yet the conflict continues. Think about why that might be. After Rodriguez left, Marcus sat in his living room and tried to make sense of the implication. Was the officer suggesting he'd somehow invited this continued harassment? That his very existence was provocation enough? The internet technician arrived and confirmed what Marcus already knew. The damage was deliberate and would cost nearly $400 to repair. They could have someone out tomorrow to fix it. In the meantime, Marcus was stuck tethering his work computer to his phone's hotspot, watching his data plan evaporate. That evening, David called. Julia showed me some posts on the neighborhood Facebook group. You need to see them. Marcus didn't have Facebook anymore. Sarah had managed their joint account, and he'd deleted it after she died, unable to face the sympathy posts and memory notifications. But David sent screenshots. Karen had posted a long screed about dangerous neighbors, mentioning no names but making it obvious who she meant. The post described a man who'd threatened her children, drained his pool out of spite, and was creating a hostile environment on their street. Dozens of comments offered support, speculation, and judgmental observations about certain people who didn't understand community values. A few commenters defended Marcus, Mrs. Palmer among them, but they were shouted down by Karen's supporters. The narrative was set. Marcus Chen was the villain. Grieving widower had become code for unstable threat. "This is libel," Marcus said. "She's making things up." "Probably, but are you going to sue her? Drag this out in court?" "I don't know, maybe. I can't just let her destroy my reputation." "Marcus, your reputation in that neighborhood is already gone. Most of those people don't know you. They'll believe whatever makes a better story. Fighting it might make things worse." "So what do I do?" David was quiet for a long moment. "Have you thought about moving?" The question hit Marcus like a punch. "Move? Why should I move? I didn't do anything wrong." "I know that, but sometimes being right doesn't matter. Sometimes the cost of being right is too high." After they hung up, Marcus walked through his house, seeing it with new eyes. Every room held memories of Sarah. Her books still lined the shelves. Her clothes still hung in the closet. Her coffee mug, the one with the stupid pun she'd loved, sat in the cabinet waiting to be used. Moving would mean leaving all of it behind. Moving would mean Karen won. But staying meant daily warfare with no end in sight. Marcus made himself dinner and ate without tasting it. He tried to watch television but couldn't focus. Eventually, he went to bed early, exhausted by the mental gymnastics of trying to figure out the right path forward. He was nearly asleep when he heard it. A crash, glass breaking, coming from downstairs. Marcus bolted upright, his heart hammering. Another crash. Someone was in his house. He grabbed his phone and dialed 911 while moving quietly toward his bedroom door. 911, what's your emergency? Someone's breaking into my house, Marcus whispered. I can hear them downstairs. The dispatcher kept him on the line while he crept toward the stairs. The sounds were coming from the living room. Breaking glass, footsteps, more than one person. Marcus's security system would have caught them on camera. He pulled up the app on his phone with shaking hands, switching to live view. 3 figures in hoodies and masks were in his living room, systematically smashing everything they could reach. Photos, frames, lamps, the television. One of them picked up Sarah's favorite vase and hurled it against the wall. They're destroying my house, Marcus told the dispatcher. 3 people, masks, please hurry. Officers are 2 minutes away, sir. Stay where you are, don't confront them. But Marcus was already moving down the stairs, rage overwhelming fear. These people were destroying Sarah's things, the last pieces of his life with her. The rage that had been simmering for weeks finally boiled over. Get out, he roared. The 3 figures spun toward him. For a moment, nobody moved. Marcus stood on the stairs in his boxer shorts and t-shirt, unarmed and outnumbered, facing down people who'd invaded his home. Then they ran. All 3 bolted for the back door, the same way they'd entered. Marcus chased them, his bare feet crunching on broken glass. He made it to the backyard just in time to see them scrambling over his fence into the Hendersons' yard. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Marcus stood in his destroyed backyard, bleeding from cuts on his feet, watching the empty fence. They'd come from that direction. They'd fled that direction. The connection was impossible to ignore. 2 patrol cars arrived, and suddenly his yard was full of flashlights and voices. Officer Rodriguez was there again, taking in the scene with grim recognition. Mr. Chen, you're bleeding. Marcus looked down at his feet at the dark streaks of blood on the concrete. They broke in, 3 people. They destroyed my living room. Did you see their faces? Masks, but they ran through the Hendersons' yard. That doesn't prove. I know it doesn't prove anything. Marcus felt something break inside him. I know the rules, Officer Rodriguez. I need evidence. I need proof. But we both know who's behind this. We both know Corinne Henderson orchestrated this somehow. And we both know nothing's going to happen to her because I can't prove it. An EMT appeared and guided Marcus to sit down so they could clean his feet. The police processed the scene, taking photos and collecting what little evidence existed. Inside, Marcus's living room looked like a war zone. Nearly everything breakable had been shattered. The television was in pieces. Sarah's photos lay scattered across the floor, glass covering her smiling face. One of the officers emerged from the house with a piece of paper in an evidence bag. Found this on the floor. Looks like they dropped it. Marcus stared at the paper through the clear plastic. It was a printout of Corinne's Facebook post, with certain sections highlighted. That's direct evidence, Rodriguez said quietly. This ties back to the online harassment. It's premeditation. But not proof of who actually did it. No, but it's a start. We'll dust for prints, check the security footage, interview the Hendersons. Mr. Chen, I need to ask you something and I need you to be honest. Marcus looked up from his bandaged feet. What? Do you have anyone who could stay with you tonight? Family? Friends? You think they'll come back? I think you're not safe here right now, and I think you need to seriously consider whether this house is worth the fight. After the police left, Marcus sat amid the wreckage of his living room and called David. His brother answered on the second ring, voice thick with sleep. Marcus, it's 1 in the morning. They broke into my house, 3 people, they destroyed everything. What, are you okay? No, I'm not okay. Can I stay with you for a few days? Of course, pack a bag. I'm coming to get you right now. While he waited, Marcus walked through his house in a daze. He gathered clothes, toiletries, his laptop. In the bedroom, he paused at Sarah's side of the closet. Her dresses hung in neat rows, colors organized the way she'd always liked. He pressed his face into one, breathing in the faint scent of her perfume that still clung to the fabric. I don't know what to do, he whispered to the empty room. Everything's falling apart and I don't know how to fix it. Sarah didn't answer. She was gone, as permanently gone as she'd been for the past year. The house was just a building full of objects. The pool was just concrete and tile. None of it brought her back. None of it meant anything without her. David arrived 40 minutes later and took in the destruction with barely suppressed fury. Jesus Christ, Marcus. Yeah. We're calling a lawyer first thing tomorrow. This has gone too far. Marcus grabbed his hastily packed bag and took one last look at the house. Even in its damaged state, even surrounded by broken glass and chaos, it was still home. Still the place where he'd built a life with Sarah. Still the only place he could feel close to her memory. But maybe David was right. Maybe some costs were too high. They drove through empty streets while Marcus explained everything that had happened. David listened without interruption, his hands tight on the steering wheel, his jaw clenched. She's done, David finally said. Corinne Henderson is done. We'll destroy her in court. Harassment, stalking, property damage, conspiracy to commit breaking and entering. She'll wish she'd never started this. You think we can prove it? We'll find a way, because you're right, Marcus. This is all her, and people like her only stop when they face consequences. At David's house, Julia made up the guest room while Emma hovered nearby, her teenage bravado replaced by genuine concern. Marcus sat at their kitchen table drinking tea he didn't want, feeling untethered from reality. You can stay as long as you need, Julia said. We'll figure this out. But Marcus wasn't sure there was anything to figure out. The situation had spiraled beyond his ability to control or even understand. He just wanted to swim in his own pool. Now his house was destroyed, his reputation was in tatters, and he was fleeing like a refugee from suburban warfare. He lay awake in David's guest room until dawn painted the windows gray. His mind churned through everything, looking for the moment where it all went wrong, the decision that had led to this catastrophe. Draining the pool, confronting Karen the first time, installing the pool in the first place. Marrying Sarah, only to lose her and be left alone in a hostile world. No, he couldn't think like that. Loving Sarah had been the best decision of his life. Her loss wasn't the problem. The problem was Karen Henderson and her refusal to accept basic human boundaries. Marcus got out of bed and pulled up his security camera app. The cameras were still running, still recording his empty house. He scrolled through the footage from the break-in, watching the masked figures destroy his possessions. One of them was smaller than the others, younger maybe, or female. He zoomed in on the footage, enhancing it as much as the app allowed. The smallest figure moved with a distinctive gait, favoring the left leg slightly. Marcus thought about everyone he'd seen around Karen, her friends, her husband who was rarely home, her children. A terrible suspicion formed. Marcus screenshot the footage and sent it to Officer Rodriguez with a message. Check the smallest intruder's gait. Looks like a limp or injury. Recent. The response came 20 minutes later. We're investigating. Don't do anything on your own. But Marcus was already researching. He pulled up the neighborhood Facebook group that David had shown him, scrolling through Karen's posts and photos. There, from 3 weeks ago, a photo of her family at a soccer game. Young Ethan with a walking boot on his left foot. Marcus's hands shook as he compared the timestamps. The boot had come off about a week ago, but a serious enough injury would still affect the way someone walked. And Ethan was small for 11, thin enough to pass for the figure in the footage. Karen had sent her own son to vandalize Marcus's house. The realization made him physically ill. What kind of mother did that? What kind of person used their child as a weapon in a neighborhood dispute? Marcus forwarded the photos to Officer Rodriguez along with his suspicions. Then he sat in the quiet guest room and tried to process the depth of Karen's malice. David knocked softly before entering. You're up early, or did you sleep at all? Not really. David, I think Karen sent Ethan to trash my house, along with who knows who else. Maybe her husband, maybe friends. That's insane. I know, but look at this. Marcus showed him the footage comparison, the gait analysis, the soccer photos. David studied it all with growing horror. We're definitely getting that lawyer today. They spent the morning calling law offices, looking for someone who specialized in harassment and property damage cases. Most required consultations that were weeks out, but David's persistence finally found them an attorney willing to squeeze Marcus in that afternoon. Robert Keller had an office in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. He was younger than Marcus expected, maybe 40, with prematurely gray hair and sharp eyes that suggested he missed nothing. Marcus laid out the entire saga while Keller took notes. This is a good case, Keller said when Marcus finished. Better than good, actually. You have documentation, security footage, escalating harassment, and now physical property damage. The social media posts establish motive and premeditation. If we can prove the Henderson woman orchestrated the break-in, you're looking at criminal charges plus a substantial civil suit. I just wanted to stop, Marcus said. I don't care about money. Money is how it stops, Mr. Chen. People like Karen Henderson only understand consequences when it hits their wallet or their freedom. You pursue both, and she'll think twice about ever doing this again. What's the process? We file a comprehensive lawsuit. Harassment, stalking, defamation, conspiracy, property damage, intentional infliction of emotional distress. We go after her for everything. Simultaneously, we work with the police to ensure criminal charges are filed. We make this as painful as possible. David leaned forward. How long will it take? Months, maybe a year. These things don't move fast, but in the meantime, we can get a restraining order. Force her to stay away from Marcus and cease all contact. That alone might de-escalate the situation. Marcus signed the retainer agreement and wrote a check that made his stomach hurt. But Keller was right. This had to end, and the only way to end it was through the legal system. Over the next week, Keller moved with impressive speed. He filed for an emergency restraining order, submitted mountains of evidence to the police, and generally made Corinne Henderson's life difficult. Marcus stayed at David's house, afraid to return home, watching the situation unfold from a safe distance. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for Thursday. Marcus dressed in a suit he hadn't worn since Sarah's funeral and drove to the courthouse with David beside him. They met Keller in the hallway outside the courtroom, and the attorney briefed them on what to expect. The judge will hear both sides. Keep your answers brief and factual. Don't let her get under your skin. Corinne arrived with her own lawyer, a severe woman in an expensive suit. They studiously ignored Marcus, taking seats on the opposite side of the hallway. Ethan was with them, looking small and frightened. Marcus tried not to stare at the boy. Tried not to imagine him smashing pictures of Sarah on command from his mother. The hearing was mercifully quick. Marcus testified about the pattern of harassment, submitting the security footage, the social media posts, the police reports. Corinne's lawyer tried to paint him as an unstable grieving widower who'd overreacted to children playing, but the evidence was overwhelming. Judge Patricia Morrison, a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and no-nonsense demeanor, reviewed everything with obvious displeasure. Mrs. Henderson, do you understand that if even half of what Mr. Chen alleges is true, you're facing serious criminal charges? Corinne's composure cracked slightly. Your Honor, I was simply protecting my children from a threatening neighbor. By organizing a break-in, by vandalizing his property, by conducting a social media campaign of harassment. Judge Morrison looked at Corinne over her reading glasses. I'm granting the restraining order. You are to have no contact with Mr. Chen. No direct contact, no indirect contact through third parties, and absolutely no social media posts about him. You will stay at least 100 yards away from his person and property at all times. Do you understand? Yes, Your Honor, Corinne said quietly. I'm also referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for Criminal Prosecution. Mrs. Henderson, I strongly suggest you hire a very good criminal defense attorney. Outside the courthouse, Marcus felt both vindicated and empty. He'd won. The legal system had recognized the harassment, but it felt like closing the barn door after all the horses had escaped. His house was still damaged. His peace was still shattered. Sarah was still gone. This is a good start, Keller said. Now we build the civil case. Marcus returned to his house that afternoon, accompanied by David for moral support. The locksmith had already been there, changing all the locks. The security company had upgraded his system. The place felt like a fortress now, locked down and defensive. The living room had been cleaned but not repaired. Broken furniture had been removed. The walls showed scars where objects had impacted. Sarah's photos were gone, either destroyed or too damaged to display. Marcus stood in the middle of the room and felt nothing. We can fix this, David said. New furniture, fresh paint, it'll look good as new. It's not about how it looks. I know. Marcus walked to the back door and stared out at the empty pool. The concrete had darkened with dirt and algae, making it look even more abandoned, a monument to his failed attempt at boundaries. I'm going to sell, he said. David came to stand beside him. You sure? Yeah, I can't stay here. Every room is full of ghosts, real ones from Sarah and new ones from all this. I need to start over somewhere else. Okay, then we'll help you. That evening, Marcus called a real estate agent and started the process of listing his house. It felt both liberating and terrifying, like cutting the last tether to his old life. But Sarah wouldn't want him to live in a war zone. She wouldn't want him to sacrifice his mental health defending an empty pool. The next few weeks blurred together in a haze of legal proceedings, house preparations, and forced forward momentum. The police formally charged Karen with multiple crimes, including conspiracy to commit burglary and cyberstalking. Her social media presence went silent as her lawyer undoubtedly advised. Marcus's house went on the market with professional photos that carefully avoided showing the empty pool. The listing described it as a fixer-upper opportunity and priced it accordingly. Within a week, he had 3 offers. He accepted one from a young family relocating from out of state. They planned to fill the pool immediately and install a fence tall enough that no neighbor could accidentally wander in. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. The civil lawsuit proceeded through discovery. Keller subpoenaed Karen's phone records, social media accounts, and financial documents. The evidence continued to mount. Text messages between Karen and her friends discussing teaching Marcus a lesson, planning sessions for the break-in, discussions about recruiting people to help. She documented everything, Keller said with satisfaction. People always think they're smarter than they are. She built our case for us. The criminal trial was scheduled for the following spring. The civil suit would likely settle before then. Karen's lawyer had already floated settlement offers that Keller advised rejecting as too low. They were holding out for something substantial, something that would hurt. Marcus moved out of his house on a gray October morning. Professional movers loaded boxes while he stood on the lawn, taking one last look at the place he'd called home. The new owners would take possession in a week. They'd already shared their plans for the pool, showing him renderings of the tropical paradise they envisioned. Maybe it would be happy again. Maybe it would bring joy instead of conflict. Marcus climbed into his car, David following in his own vehicle, and drove to the apartment he'd rented across town. It was smaller, temporary, a landing pad while he figured out what came next. But it was his, and it was safe, and no one was trying to destroy it. The seasons turned. Autumn gave way to early winter. Marcus attended therapy weekly, slowly unpacking the trauma of the past year. Not just the Karen situation, but Sarah's death, the grief he'd never properly processed, the anger he'd directed at everything and everyone. "You were displaced," his therapist said during one session. "Your grief needed somewhere to go, and it landed on this pool conflict. That doesn't make your feelings invalid, but it helps explain why it escalated the way it did. I should have handled it differently." Maybe, but Karen Henderson made her own choices. She chose escalation every step of the way. You're not responsible for her actions. The criminal trial happened in March. Marcus testified about the break-in, the harassment, the months of conflict. Ethan Henderson testified too, crying as he admitted his mother had pressured him to participate in vandalizing Marcus's house. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Karen was sentenced to 18 months in prison and 5 years probation. Her husband filed for divorce while she awaited transfer to a minimum security facility. The house next to Marcus's old place went on the market immediately. The civil settlement came through in April. $750,000 plus legal fees. Marcus donated half of it to a charity Sarah had supported. He used the rest to buy a modest house in a different suburb, one with no pool and friendly neighbors who kept to themselves. Life slowly assembled itself into something resembling normal. Marcus took a new position with his consulting firm that required occasional office visits, forcing him back into human interaction. He started dating someone he met through David and Julia, a widow herself who understood grief's strange geography. He planted a garden where Sarah would have wanted one. He adopted a dog from the shelter. He learned to cook more than 3 dishes. He laughed again, sometimes without guilt. On a bright day in June, exactly 2 years after he drained the pool, Marcus drove past his old house. The new owners had transformed it completely. Tropical plants surrounded a now-filled pool that sparkled in the afternoon sun. Children's toys dotted the yard. A golden retriever barked from behind a tall, secure fence. It looked happy. It looked like someone's dream had finally been allowed to exist without destruction. Marcus didn't stop. He kept driving, heading toward his new home, his new life, the future he was building from the wreckage of the past. Corinne Henderson was someone else's problem now, serving her sentence, facing her consequences. The pool that had started everything was just water and concrete again, just a place for families to gather and children to play safely. Just what it always should have been. The morning Marcus received the subpoena, he was in his new backyard pulling weeds from the garden bed. His dog Luna, a rescue mutt with soulful eyes, dozed in a patch of sunlight nearby. The doorbell startled them both. A process server stood on his porch, holding a manila envelope. Marcus Chen. Yes. You've been served. Marcus accepted the envelope and closed the door before opening it. Inside was a summons for a civil suit. Corinne Henderson was suing him for emotional distress, loss of income due to imprisonment, and damage to her reputation. He read the document twice, certain he'd misunderstood. But no, Corinne, currently serving her sentence for the crimes she'd committed against him, was now claiming he'd victimized her. The lawsuit alleged that his aggressive behavior and unreasonable actions had forced her to defend her family, leading to her wrongful imprisonment. Marcus called Keller immediately. She's suing me from prison. Yeah, I just got the notice too. Keller sounded more annoyed than surprised. It's a nuisance suit, completely frivolous, but we'll have to respond to it. How can she sue me for something she went to prison for? Anyone can sue anyone for anything. Doesn't mean she'll win. In fact, I'd say there's about a 0% chance this goes anywhere, but it'll cost you time and money to defend. That's the point, isn't it? She's just trying to keep harassing me. Probably. Look, I'll file a motion to dismiss. We'll cite the criminal conviction as evidence that her claims are baseless. But Marcus, you should know, this might not be the end. Some people never let go. After hanging up, Marcus sat on his couch and stared at the lawsuit. 2 years. He'd had 2 years of relative peace, of rebuilding, of healing. Now Corinne was reaching out from her prison cell to drag him back into the conflict. Luna padded over and put her head in his lap, sensing his distress. Marcus scratched behind her ears and tried to center himself using the techniques his therapist had taught him. This was just paper, just words. It couldn't actually hurt him unless he let it. But the old anxiety crept back anyway, familiar and unwelcome. That evening, Marcus had dinner with David's family as he did most Fridays. Julia made her famous chicken piccata while Emma, now a college freshman home for the summer, regaled them with stories from her dorm. The normalcy of it helped, pulling Marcus out of his spiral. So, Emma said over dessert, Dad told me about the lawsuit. That lady is completely psycho. Emma, Julia warned. What? She is. Who sues someone from prison for something they actually did. Someone who's convinced she's the victim, Marcus said. I think she genuinely believes I ruined her life. David refilled Marcus's wine glass. Her life was already a train wreck. You just happened to be standing nearby when it exploded. That's what my therapist says. Doesn't make it easier to deal with. How's the dating thing going? Julia asked, clearly trying to change the subject. Are you still seeing Rachel? Marcus smiled despite himself. Yeah, it's good. Really good, actually. She's coming over tomorrow to help me finish the garden. That's great. You deserve some happiness. The word stuck with Marcus as he drove home that night. Happiness. Such a simple concept that had become so complicated. He was happy mostly. His new house felt like home. His relationship with Rachel was progressing naturally and comfortably. His work was satisfying. But Corinne's lawsuit reminded him that some wounds never fully healed, that some conflicts cast long shadows. Rachel came over Saturday morning with gardening gloves and a plant identification app on her phone. She'd lost her husband in a car accident 3 years prior and understood grief's jagged timeline. They'd bonded over shared loss but built something new that wasn't just trauma support. "I heard about the lawsuit," she said while they worked in the dirt together. "That's insane." "It's Corinne. Nothing she does surprises me anymore." "Does it scare you that she's still fixated on you?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "A little. Mostly it's just exhausting. I thought this was over." "Maybe it never really ends with some people. My sister-in-law is still mad at me for things I supposedly did at my husband's funeral. Some folks need an enemy to blame for their own choices." They worked in comfortable silence for a while, planting herbs and perennials. Luna supervised from the shade, occasionally wandering over to inspect their progress. By afternoon, the garden bed was transformed, bursting with potential that would bloom in the coming months. "See," Rachel said, standing back to admire their work. "You can create beautiful things even when people try to tear you down." Marcus kissed her, tasting sunshine and hope, and let himself believe it. The motion to dismiss Corinne's lawsuit was filed within a week. Keller submitted the criminal conviction records, the previous civil settlement, and a strongly worded argument about vexatious litigation. The hearing was scheduled for 2 months out. In the meantime, Marcus tried to maintain his equilibrium. He went to work. He spent time with Rachel. He took Luna on long walks through his new neighborhood, where people waved and minded their own business. He attended therapy and talked through his fears about the lawsuit reopening old wounds. "You're not the same person you were 2 years ago," his therapist reminded him. "You've done the work, you've healed. One frivolous lawsuit can't undo that unless you let it." But at night, alone in his house, Marcus sometimes found himself scrolling through news articles about Corinne's case. The media had briefly covered it as a cautionary tale about neighborhood disputes gone wrong. Some outlets painted Corinne as the villain. Others suggested Marcus had overreacted. Internet commenters argued endlessly about property rights versus community spirit. Marcus closed his laptop and reminded himself that none of it mattered. The facts were the facts. The courts had ruled. His life had moved forward. Then the letters started. The first one arrived on a Tuesday, addressed to Marcus in careful handwriting. No return address. He opened it at his kitchen table. "You destroyed my life. I hope you're proud of yourself. My children don't have a mother because you couldn't share a pool. I pray every day that you suffer the way my family has suffered." Marcus's hand shook as he read. The letter was unsigned but obviously from Corinne. He photographed it and sent it to both Keller and the police. This constituted a violation of her restraining order, potentially extending her prison time. The second letter came 3 days later, more unhinged. "I know where you live now. I have friends on the outside. You'll never be safe. You'll never know peace. I'll make sure of that." This time Marcus called the police immediately. Officer Rodriguez, who'd been promoted to detective, came to take his statement. "She's escalating from prison," Rodriguez said. "That's unusual but not unheard of. We'll notify the prison administration. They'll likely put her in isolation and screen her mail." "Will that stop her?" "Probably not completely, but it'll make it harder." Marcus filed another police report and added the letters to the pile of evidence in Corinne's case file. Her parole board would see them eventually, likely extending her time served. But knowing that didn't make Marcus feel safer. Rachel found him that evening sitting in the dark, Luna's head in his lap. "Hey," she said gently, "David called me, told me about the letters." "I'm okay." "You're not, and that's okay too." She sat beside him, taking his hand. This is scary. Someone threatening you from prison is objectively terrifying. I thought I was done with this. I thought moving and selling the house and rebuilding my life meant I was free. Maybe we're never completely free from people who want to hurt us, but we don't have to let them win. Marcus leaned into her, drawing strength from her presence. What if she does have people on the outside? What if this isn't just empty threats? Then we'll deal with it together. You're not alone this time. The third letter arrived a week later, but this one was different. It came from Corinne's lawyer, not Corinne herself, and it informed Marcus that she was withdrawing her lawsuit. The brief message offered no explanation, just a formal notice of dismissal. Keller called that afternoon, confusion evident in his voice. She dropped it, no conditions, no negotiations, just dropped the whole thing. Why? My guess. The threatening letters got back to her lawyer, who realized they completely destroyed any credibility she might have had in court, or the prison authorities came down on her hard. Either way, you're free of the lawsuit. Marcus felt relief flood through him. So that's it, it's really over. The lawsuit is. The letters are a separate criminal matter, but yeah, civilly, you're done with Corinne Henderson. That evening, Marcus took Rachel out to dinner to celebrate. They went to a nice Italian place downtown, drank wine, and talked about future plans. Rachel's daughter was starting high school in the fall. Marcus was considering expanding his consulting business. They were thinking about taking a trip together, maybe to the coast. Normal conversations, normal plans, normal life reasserting itself. But as they walked to the car after dinner, Marcus noticed a figure across the street watching them. Just standing there, motionless, staring. The light was too poor to make out details, but something about the posture set off alarm bells. Rachel, don't look now, but there's someone across the street watching us. She casually glanced over while pretending to adjust her purse. I see them. Want me to call the police? Let's just get to the car. They walked quickly to Marcus's vehicle. When he looked back, the figure was gone. He drove home, checking his mirrors constantly, but no one followed. Still, the encounter left him shaken. Rachel stayed over that night, neither of them wanting to be alone. Marcus set his security alarm and double-checked all the locks. Luna, sensing the tension, stayed close, her protective instincts engaged. Maybe I'm being paranoid, Marcus said as they got ready for bed. Maybe it was just someone waiting for a ride. Or maybe your instincts are warning you to be careful. Trust your gut. Marcus lay awake long after Rachel fell asleep, listening to the house settle around him. Every creak was a potential intruder. Every shadow through the window was a threat. The peace he'd built over 2 years felt fragile suddenly, like glass about to shatter. In the morning, he called Detective Rodriguez and reported the incident. Rodriguez promised to increase patrols in the area and suggested Marcus vary his routine to avoid being predictable. Do you think Corinne actually has people on the outside? Marcus asked. It's possible. She had friends. Some people are loyal even when they shouldn't be. Or she could be bluffing, trying to scare you from inside prison. We're monitoring her communications as much as we legally can. The next week passed without incident. Marcus began to relax again, convinced he'd overreacted. Rachel encouraged him to keep living his life, not let fear dictate his choices. They went to movies, visited David's family, worked on the garden. Then Luna disappeared. Marcus let her out in the backyard Sunday morning like always. The fence was secure, the gate locked. He went inside to make coffee and check email. When he came back 15 minutes later, Luna was gone. The gate stood open. Marcus ran through his yard calling for her, his heart pounding. The gate hadn't been open when he'd let her out. He was certain of it. Someone had come into his yard and taken his dog. He called Rachel, then David, then the police. Soon his backyard was full of people helping him search the neighborhood. They walked every street, called every shelter, posted on every social media group. But Luna was gone, vanished completely.